Welcome back to Hometown TCG, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Josh.
And I'm John.
And we are back with another deck tech for you today. And today we are talking our favorite brute, John's favorite hero, Rhinar.
Rhinar. Probably my favorite because he was my first.
Was he?
So I got a lot of love for Rhinar.
Very first deck you ever played. Well, we're going to start this one off the same way we start everyone else off. We're going to talk about what Reinhardt does well. What's some of the things Rhinar does well?
Yeah. So we're going for a claw build. So we're going for a giant turn.
True.
So he can get off one big turn. And the other thing is that the Intimidate mechanic allows you to go unblocked on your big attacks, which is kind of crazy.
Yes, and in a 20 life, or I say 20 life format, KNL 15, there's some, but in a lesser life format, that big turn of unblocked attacks can be huge, but that does bring a couple of things that he doesn't do well, and the first thing with that big turn would be the crackback, right?
Yeah. So you're doing your damage, but consistently you can be outpaced. So the problem is, if you try to go for it too early or out of turn, your opponent comes back and they have the massive crackback, like you said.
Yes, you have to be ready for your opponent. After you have your big turn, their next turn, they get to keep all their cards. They absorb that damage, but you better make it a serious turn. So those are kind of some of the things he does well, some of the things he doesn't do well. So let's get into the core of what is our build today. And our core always comes down to hero, weapons, and equipment. And for our hero, we're using Rhinar, as we talked about. And you want to talk about our weapons a little bit?
Yeah. So we chose to go the Mandible Claw. After testing, it just felt like in Blitz, you want to go for that big turn with them. Your goal is to intimidate their hand with a triple or quad intimidate to make sure they can't block you. And then go claw, and other attack.
Claw, and something else. That's going to be your bread and butter if you want one turn of claw, and something else. To kind of get you there, we are playing Barkbone Strapping and Scabskin Leathers. Right? The extra resource, maybe the ability to do a couple things in one turn is definitely needed. And to support those, you got two dice roll mechanics. You got to play Gambler's Gloves, right?
Yeah.
Filling that out, we do play Skullcap. Right, we have some optional Null Rune boots. Skullhorn's an option. We did test a lot of builds using things like Findel Spring Tunic, Heart and Cross Strap. We did Goliath Gauntlet, right?
Yeah. So Goliath Gauntlet can be great on a turn with Command and Conquer, for instance. Getting that up to 8 is pretty powerful.
Sure.
So that's always an option. In the end, we liked Barkbone Strapping a little bit better because you can block before having to use it. It helped you with the defense there. And then really, you normally only need one extra resource from it. So getting a 2 or higher roll can get you there, but just in case, we have the Gambler's Gloves as well.
Absolutely, and mind you, just a quick point of note, all of this stuff felt close, right? It wasn't that our equipment build kind of blew everything else out of the water. We just felt in playtesting as many games as we did, this got us there more often than not.
Yeah. So for your build, you may end up wanting to go with something like Tunic or with the Heart and Cross Strap.
Right, and that could vary based on your local meta and who you're playing against. But I mean, we talked about it. The big core of this deck is that big turn, and you're gonna need a big turn, right? And we've we've got tools in here to get you that big turn, right?
Yeah. So to help get you there, first of all, you're gonna want to get an energy potion on the field and your Blood Rush Bellow in your arsenal.
Right. So we will require a little bit of setup, which could be awkward. You got to know how to play that. It's going to be skill based.
So you got your energy potions because they help you get off your claws and everything. You got your Blood Rush Bellow because they make all your attacks do +2 damage for the turn. And ideally, you're hitting 2 of those to make all your attacks do +4 for the turn. And then you have other cards that help you get you there with the Intimidate, being Barraging Beatdown. Because that can add to damage and get rid of cards from their hand, and Awakening Bellow as well.
Right, and we tried a couple builds with, Primeval Bellow, correct?
Yeah.
We felt like it just doesn't, the cost doesn't really get you there, right? It's a little too situational, and with the deck lacking some consistency, we were really, really in the need for some kind of consistent damage output on that big turn, so we left it out. Right.
The Primeval Bellow, it felt like you needed the right thing. You needed your hand to be all 6s with yellows.
Yes.
And the randomness just didn't feel right.
And we work too hard to bring decks that are going to be good over a consistent amount of games, right? Yeah, maybe in these games you can get off a bigger turn every once in a while, but we want the consistency and to kind of give us that along with that big turn where you want the double claws and some attacks. We do have just a lot of great brute goodies and good attacks,
right?
So
let's talk about those.
We have to play Alpha Rampage, right?
Yeah, and Alpha Rampage is a great one for first turn of the game.
Oh my goodness. And the first turn of the game in this deck, probably more important than any deck we've played so far.
Yeah, because if you can go Barraging Beatdown into Alpha Rampage, you can intimidate 2 to 3 cards from their hand.
Right.
And
they'll get those resources back.
That's pretty huge.
Always.
Yeah, they're going to get it back anyway.
Agreed. So we do run other things. I mean, massacres are definitely huge in here. Pack hunts, riled up. Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, you got your Smash Instinct.
Okay.
That's another one, costs 3, but you don't have to discard from your hand.
True.
And then Brutal Assault. Or sorry, Predatory Assault.
Right.
That's another one that only costs 2. It has Dominate on it too, which can be interesting off of the Blood Rush Bellow. Normally you don't need the Dominate, but there are turns where you can Blood Rush Bellow into it.
Right.
And make sure that your Barraging Beatdowns hit if you know they have 2 cards left, for instance.
Right, and that phrase you just used, the make sure, right, kind of ensure these things happen. Anything we could do with this build to ensure its consistency, right? To be able to land some things here and there is really what we needed because we are trying to set up for that big turn. And the deck comes with, from the decks we've talked about so far, it comes with kind of a smaller toolbox of stuff. Right?
So some other things to help you would be Sigil of Solace. Obviously, it can help you life gain to outpace Wizard or to just help you with the Kadachis.
I would say hang in there with Ira or any ninja for as long as you can.
Yeah.
Drones for those long games too.
Yep. And have a red and a blue drone for those long games.
Yes, and then Command and Conquer is huge in this deck. I feel like it can really slow down your Dorinthias, right? Your Iras, almost anything we've talked about so far.
Right, yeah, and slowing it down is the key term because you need to live long enough to get to that big turn. So anything you can do to put that pressure on helps you.
True, it's going to aid that setup that you want to get to. And something we haven't touched on yet in this deck is the resource allocation. And that was tougher because, as we've talked about, a lot of our Intimidate mechanics come from discarding 6 power cards, 6 power attack cards, or auto-intimidate off our setup cards. However, if you're playing a lot of blues, you're not playing a ton of 6 attacks.
Yeah, your only one can be Wreck or Romp at that point.
Right, it adds a little bit of RNG, and again, our keyword in this deck has been, we're striving for consistency, and we can't have RNG come into play more than it already is.
Yeah.
So we're playing some select blues here. You want to talk about those?
Right, so the first is Wreck or Romp, obviously. It fills the 6 role and being a blue.
Yes, it's a bad example that does both.
Yeah, so then we have Smash Instinct. So Smash Instinct can be an attack after your double claws that doesn't cost you a discard card. It only costs you resources. We've already talked about the energy potions being in there. Then we have Pack Hunt, which is another one that fulfills that role of being a brute attack, but doesn't require a discard. And then the last one would be Savage Feast. And that's a brute attack. It does require the discard, but it's one that you could go for your Scab Skin Leathers with if you feel like you need to, and it can replace itself.
True.
So it's there if you have to use it, go for that role.
And I feel like we upped the number of blues in the build, kind of anticipating a little bit of that Kano matchup, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I think the ratio is a little higher than I would play in Classic Constructed. But
you have to play against that. You can't get blown out.
You need them.
And I want to stress this enough, guys. This deck is going to be a skill-based deck. You're going to have to get some games in with it. You're going to have to play a bunch of different opponents to see how it plays. And patience, I think, is one thing we learned most when playing this deck, is patience is going to be essential if you want to pilot it to a win.
Right. You got to wait until you have it. And if you go for it too early or you get too greedy, you're just going to get beaten.
You're going to use it, and then you're going to lose it.
Yeah. You got to make sure you get the kill.
So there's a lot of skill in this matchup. Some of the tougher matchups, obviously Ira was a tough matchup for us, just because, the deck is so consistent and we're lacking a little bit of that consistency.
Yeah, so that's one where you have to be super patient and wait for it.
Absolutely. I felt like this deck surprisingly played quite well against Kano, even with the lack of blues, but it feels that matchup feels coin flipping.
Right, so with Kano, what's great is if you open up with a Barraging Beatdown, they don't know whether to go for it or not. So that's what helps you there, and the fact that you do have the option to run 5 Null Rune.
Right.
So that helps there. Obviously, more blues would put it pretty big in your favor, I would say.
You did make an interesting point when we were discussing earlier, running the 5 null rune and then maybe siding in that club for the Kano matchup and just 5 null rune club every turn. Try to draw the game out, see what you can do, see if you can get off a big out rampage for the win.
If they're not going for OTK, you can just grind them out that way easy.
Exactly, but it's hit or miss. But all right, so we've play tested this deck. We believe this is our most consistent build that we've come up with to date. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing about your favorite hero?
Gosh, yeah, I love him. I want to keep playing as him, and I hope he can really find his place in the meta.
Well, I hope that this build cracks open your local meta. We know we're going to take it to a couple events. We're going to try to crack ours open. Anyway, we've been Hometown TCG, guys. I'm Josh.
And I'm John.
And we'll see you for the next one.